Welcome to the first episode of Series 89, everyone. Please excuse my voice. I just got back from my first Packers game, and this is apparently what I sound like for the next couple of days or so. But without further ado, this month we have returning guest Petrusha to learn about the game he is designing called Ghost in the Shell, a forged-in-the-dark cyberpunk RPG set in the world of Ghost in the Shell. In today's episode, we learn all about the history of this game, along with a bit about the series and movies of Ghost in the Shell itself. But before we get to all of that, we do have some calls of action coming up after the show. Here's what to expect. You can join me here after the show to learn about our Undying Bonds stream being delayed once more, as well as our Patreon, how to leave a review for the show, and our patron thank yous as usual. With all of that out of the way, enjoy the show, everyone. Welcome to Character Creation Cast, a show where we discuss and create characters, the best part of role-playing games, with guests using their favorite systems. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan, and this episode, my co-host Amelia and I are excited to welcome back to the show former guest Petrusha from Imagining Games to learn about their new cyberpunk RPG called Ghost in the Shell, published by Man & Project Studio.
Yeah, you may have heard of it.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Character Creation Cast. I'm excited that you're back here. It has been almost 4 years since we talked about Chew with you, which doesn't seem
I don't know how it's been that long.
I know, it blows my mind.
That is what Ryan wrote in the outline, and I feel like it has to be a lie. But
I did a double take when I went back.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah. I mean, also the fact that
like it was just a year ago, right?
Yeah, well, like you're still putting out stuff for it because obviously, like I've gotten several things in the mail through the Ennies, so I was like, clearly things are still coming out, which means it's a recent thing, right?
I have so many feels about all that. Yeah. Because it says so much too. Because I was like 4 years ago. Because I'm here every year if I can be. So I've just been working on a lot of stuff. It's all called Chew. There have been some other things, as we're going to talk about here, that have just also been happening, but like just not at the forefront, right? So
yeah,
I was very excited to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the sort of like creative process too of like, well, I know you guys haven't seen it, but I have been working. I have been doing things in the meantime.
I know. I had some people yell at me at the Kickstarter. They were like, quit telling us all the stuff you're working on. Where's my stuff? You know, I was like, yeah, I get it. But I am doing things, you know?
Right,
like, yeah.
I promise. Can you remind our audience who you are along with your pronouns? And then please tell us some of those things that you've been working on and where people can find you.
Yeah, so Petrusha, I go by Pete because Peter was my father's name. I think I'm the third, but that's too much information. I'm an Emmy Award-winning game designer and game publisher. So I've been on this show for Rest in Pieces and Chew. Those are my Emmy nom and then Emmy winner. And back for Ghost in the Shell. A lot of people know me for conventions because I do a lot of shows. I think I did 17 last year.
Wow.
So, and I get a wide selection as I curate for multiple distributors and partners. So a lot of people are like, oh, that's the RPG guy at my Comic-Con or whatever it is, you know? Yeah. So I publish through Imagining Games, which is my imprint. But things I've been working on. So obviously Ghost in the Shell. We have a For Dummies book. How to Design TTRPGs for Dummies by Wiley.
Oh.
And that's coming out, I think, next month. I was the technical editor, which is, so I read it before you. And I wrote a cool adventure that I really loved for Battlelords of the 23rd Century. It's called Halcyon Days or Halcyon Days. A little bit of like the closest thing I've ever got to do something like Firefly, but it's not at all. But that's kind of the genre, you know?
Yeah.
So if you get a chance, check that out too.
Very cool.
Very cool. Well, let's go ahead and get into this game, and we'll start by discussing what this game is all about.
What's in a game?
What is this game?
Yeah. What is the core concept of Ghost in the Shell, Pete?
So it's funny because I always have to preface this a little bit in the way that like we've all experienced cyberpunk for a long period of time, most of our lives, given the age range of us. And with that really emerging like in the 80s, it's hard to sometimes help people see the gravity of like where it's come because we like when I was just a little kid playing with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like this was a thing that was starting to come out of like Neuromancer and books and then lead into things that pioneers of the cyberpunk genre like Ghost in the Shell would pop into our radar in like the 90s. And now sometimes with some of the people that I talk to or game design with who were born in the 2000s, I'm like, they mentioned things in Matrix, and I'm like, yeah, Ghost in the Shell did that. Yeah, Ghost in the Shell did that. Yeah, Ghost in the Shell did that. Because it was a pioneer of the genre. And what I mean by that is, so Cyberpunk dealt with like the man versus machine. When our level of technology gets just to the cusp of like when we can be like a cyborg, when we can have prosthetics that are maybe better than human. At what point do you make these choices? Like, what is human identity when this becomes widespread in a world like ours, like in a capitalistic world where corporations rise to power? And these stories of cyberpunk or 2077 or Shadowrun or the other major games in this genre really take us to like dystopian futures, but like a dystopian near future. And now what's funny with Ghost in the Shell is that like this iteration of the game is like 2029, which isn't far from us now. So it's also interesting how we envision cyberpunk of the future, and then we get closer and closer to the realities of where we actually get. Like we don't have flying cars, but
yeah. No, but 2029 is like not that. My oldest child I keep getting papers home that are like class of 2029, and like she's a freshman in high school, and so it's like that's really like a couple like we're there like
yeah. So the big part is that it's going to feel very modern in the way that there's cars, and the way that there's roads and there's cities, and the way that they're the power structure of society where most people feel like they can't quite get to any change. Like there's no real change in the world. Things just kind of have a power structure locked in place when it comes to social hierarchy. In the core concept of Ghost in the Shell is that you are like a special ops team, like a counterterrorism team, but you have been given the authority in Japan to be above the law, because sometimes what needs to be corrected is the law, is the people in law, is the power brokers themselves. And for there ever to be actually true public security, you need a group of people, the best of the best, who can actually step above them and have no one to answer to, because someone has to protect the people when the people who are supposed to protect them aren't.
I don't think any of us can relate to those kinds of feelings at all. I'm honestly getting really tired of covering cyberpunk games on this show and being like, so you're explaining real life to me? Like, it's a really frustrating concept.
Yeah. But the beauty of it is like that this is getting to the heart of that dream. Like we're actually like at a perfect time in like history to like want this game, to want this ideal of like where the critical mass of people is like, what if our superhero of today could just be one of us, a group of us that is just so damn good and just has just enough authority and opportunity, they could really be the change, the freedom fighters, if you will, of our era, the ones we need, even if they're not the ones we deserve, or that kind of Batman moral thing. So you play legendary characters. I mean, you play characters like these people know one another. They have faced each other in the past, crossed each other, because you are the best of the best, whether it's police or special operations or mercenaries. So it's also cool that you're playing like legends. You are living legends. So
that's very cool.
You answer to the Prime Minister of Japan and to the one person at the top of public security, which is you have two bosses, and they're the only checks you have.
Dang.
That's wild.
So for the setting, you mentioned, kind of like the 2029. I'm curious about like what is different in this game versus like now, because 4 years from now isn't that far. Like Ryan and I ideally will still be putting out this podcast in 2029. Like, so what kind of differences are there in this sort of like near future? But definitely.
So the biggest one that's at the forefront is the prosthetic body, and the idea of a cyber brain. So I'm going to start with like the biggest concepts and then kind of branch out to the broad daily stuff like you're talking about. So the cyber brain is like a encased computer, or however you want to say, like mechanically improved brain. It is a cyborg brain encased in a metal casing that protects it and leaves you the possibility of, if you have a current model that is not outdated, that you can theoretically have your body destroyed and your mind be replaced into a new body, and therefore still be you.
Okay.
As we mentioned, tackling concepts of identity and what makes you human versus machine, that at its core tells you everything you kind of need to know physically is like, are you still you?
Continuity of memory.
And a lot of that would be like the question of like, is there a soul? Is your brain, is parts of that memory, which is now supplemented by, hard drives, is that still soul? Is that still the spirit, the essence of humanity? Or are we just data? Which these questions are not meant to be answered. They're meant to be, proposed, like fate or destiny, and for us to romanticize and to fight for the idea, because the idea is what we want. We want there to be, true determination. But as that branches out, the possibility of prosthetic bodies at first starts like most things with the military, like super soldiers. And the core character in the Ghost in the Shell series is like the one person in the entire world that is the most adapted to a cyborg body. And that's because they basically took them while they were still in their mother's body and put them in a cyborg body. So all their embryo and their birth, in the most widely accepted version of the story, has always known a cyborg body. So therefore there was no inefficiency in the adaptation to it, or no rejection. Making them the most attuned, right, is kind of the idea. So with that, this branches out to broader society of like what we see even in Arise, which is kind of the time period, the almost the prequel to the original movies, which are more like 2029, a little bit later. The Arise series, which this license started out of, was like 2027 and 2029. So it is an alternate version, so they don't totally sync. Realities are a little alternate. They kind of do this too much with Ghost in the Shell, unfortunately. But
I was looking at. Well, I guess we'll get to that when we get to like kind of the history of things. But I was like reading as I was like Googling it this weekend after I got back and knew we were going to talk about this, and I was like, I can help because I've had to decipher it's like,
a lot.
Here's the list of 25 video games, 37 animes, 7 made for TV movies, and I was like, I can't. And they're like all called Ghost in the Shell. Like some of them are literally. I was like, oh no.
So imagine when the people in power, like if we have oligarchs today, like if they can all be like, hey, we have enough money, give us a cyborg body that looks like when I was 22. And these elements of things begin to happen. First, it starts with like the super soldier, right? Which you get like Motoko, the main character, and Bato, and a lot of these characters that you'll see. But then it also branches out to the rich and the famous. And before it can, it can't really get to the normal common person yet. But maybe later in the series, we get to 2030s, that becomes more commonplace. But with that in mind, it becomes like, we are the people looking up at high society. We are the people transitioning and knowing that there are people right now that are upgrading their bodies in ways that we can't compete with. The strength to rip off of a door of a car or jump 30 feet in the air. Like these superhuman things that we see only in comic books become a reality for people in the military, and then maybe the rich. And we also live in a world where you have a whole society who's staring up and looking at that like, is that what we want? Because it's happening, and they're telling us that it needs to, and they're forcing things like cyber brains on us, and we're all getting these little augmentations, so we're more connected to the internet, which they call the net. So that is really the core setting and the core question of where it all comes about, the philosophy in Ghost in the Shell. But broadly, some things are interesting that I just want to make a quick note on is like the net. The net is a version of the internet, though it was conceived of in the 90s. While it has elements of like wireless internet and like remote access, that we take for granted today, it's very interesting that it's very divisive in Ghost in the Shell of at what parts. There's a lot of story convenience that's been done with the access to the internet in the Ghost in the Shell universe, where occasionally you see characters who are like, the best hackers of their generation be able to remotely control something from like 5 feet away. But then for the most part, still need to kind of like take a landline to connect to things when it's important, because the level of security that can be just encrypted around things can just be so much to stonewall people that you would never just try to hack a military base.
Yeah.
You would get inside and you'd hack. And for these conveniences that are story convenient, they're also excellent and convenient for role-playing games.
Yes.
Because if you've played cyberpunk games like me and started with your first game of Shadowrun, nobody liked the Deckers because they're super complicated, but also because they just sat in a van. You know, they didn't have to be in the adventure. And then that creates two different story games that were bouncing back and forth, just inherently based in character types. So
it's not like the cover of Shadowrun 2nd Edition where the hackers plug it into the
That's
ATM.
My first game. I think you remember that. Yeah, that's my first game. Yeah, that was the first book I found at 10 years old and was like, I don't know what role-playing game is, but I want that.
But I want to do that.
I don't know what it is. And so you're in Japan, you're in New Tokyo. This is, like we said, 2027. There's been some wars that have caused like nuclear wars. So there's a more ravaged society. Not that you can see it in the megacity, but you can see it in a bit of like the infrastructure of the city has a little bit of like an outer ring, inner ring. And that's partially because of fortifications. And there's more rubble in different parts of like neighboring countries. Because I think it's like, this is like the Third World War, but not Third World War. It's like the Third Tokyo War or New Tokyo War. I got to look up my lore on that, but 3 of 5 that happened before 2030-ish. So,
wild.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
We still got time.
I know.
This could still be our future.
Right?
Amelia, stop. 4 years. It's okay.
Don't do that.
No,
you don't
stop
want
manifesting.
this. I don't know. At this point, it might be better. I don't know.
It might be. I don't
it's
know.
the horrible fiction that goes in the show. It's not real.
If we're going to be in the cyberpunk world without the cyber, might as well add the cyber portion of things. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree.
What could go wrong?
Consensus. Play Ghost in the Shell. Find out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What tools do we need to actually play this game then?
So we get leading the cart before the horse, right? It's a Forge in the Dark game. So with that in mind, you're going to need character sheets. In this case, hopefully really sweet playbook-oriented ones that don't have you writing a lot in the future. For the quick start, we have a more general one because you're also not having that many things to pick and write on the sheet. So it helped the page count. Pencils or whatever your favorite tool of devices to write on said character sheet, and D6s. Like most Forge in the Dark games, you probably want 2 to 4. But in this game, I would actually say you probably want like 4 to 6.
Because it's a cyberpunk game, so more dice is better.
Yeah, that's right. I was like, what would Shadowrun do? What would Catalyst do?
Dice.
You know, like more dice. Yeah.
When in doubt and you're not sure about the mechanics, add more dice.
Yeah, especially D6s. You got to get that bathtub somehow.
I'll have to think about that because the funny part is obviously what the reason for that is to make it have more combat. And to have more of a focus on damage systems and stuff than Forge in the Dark typically has, because there's a level of action that people are going to want that's desirable in a Ghost in the Shell game that Forge in the Dark can do as Forge in the Dark does, but narratively speaking, that it isn't as much as a lot of people want. And I know that from my experience with Chew, for example, that didn't need that whole extra combat element that this one does.
Yeah.
Yeah, people want to have more dice, want to know how much damage they did. They want to know to what. They want to feel the grit that you're not going to get in a lot of story games. So. But that's it. There is a mission sheet. So there'd be like one table sheet that's more for the game master to have as a visual aid. But some people are like, dude, all your games have a board. So, of course, I made a game for a different company, and it could be a board, but right now they kept it on a sheet. So I was like, you could make a board.
I think you just got to glue it to some cardboard, and then you have a board. That's really,
You're good to go. Print it out like on 4 pieces of paper. You're all set.
Yeah. You know, speaking of that, I didn't really address that just to make sure that it's level. So I am Pete Petrusha. I designed this game. Imagining Games had the right to kind of design the RPG. But really, the publishers, Mana Project Studios, that was mentioned, and it's in partnership with Don't Panic Studios, which is a French tabletop company. So those two are truly like the co-publishers. And then while Imagining Games will get dropped here or there, that's just because kind of like how we sign the papers, right? But but I was given the design lead, and then I brought in John Smykel, a friend of mine who loves Ghost in the Shell, and was like, you have people come out of the woodwork when you're making a game that people really want to like play with, the toys they want to play with. Yeah. So John was one of the people who was like, if you ever need a hand, and I was like, John, you don't do this stuff anymore. You did it once. You didn't like it. You don't want it. But if this will get you up, come on over, you know? So John's been a wonderful addition. So the two of us have had many talks late into the evening. So.
I'm
intrigued.
Just
want to make sure that was all addressed before we get too far.
Yeah, so. I'm actually intrigued. Maybe we'll have to get more into it when we get into our discussion episode about because Mana Project Studios is Italian, aren't they?
Yep.
So I was like, this is a very international project you have going on.
Don't Panic is French.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
Yeah. All right. I might have more questions about that later.
Yeah, for sure.
We've talked a little bit about it, just in particular with this being kind of a cyberpunk game, but what kind of stories and themes do you feel like this game is designed to explore?
Yeah, so the big ones, it's kind of high-minded counterterrorism. So a lot of people, when you think of terrorism or counterterrorism, are going to think of all these Call of Duty games, because most of us have had that beat into us. But the idea that you're a squad that's going to have the main character we often call the Major. And the Major, it's also because so many of them come out of special forces in the military. So the idea is they function as a high-minded military unit. And they're brought in. The interesting thing, I'm trying to make sure I don't step on words here, is the game structure is that you always get sent on a mission. And then in media res, one of these terms we like to throw around, in the middle of a job, you get sidelined by another job. You don't know that it's a job, but the only reason why this team of legendary military-minded, tight-knit, teamwork unit can be challenged is by something that they don't even know is happening. So like any good Ghost in the Shell episode or ongoing manga arc or movie, this is what happens, is they're doing something, and then something else happens while they're doing a thing that they had no connection to, were not involved in, but pulls them in. It opens the question of what is that about? Who are those people? What are they doing? And leads the hunt for why this legendary crew isn't there, perfectly equipped, ready to go, and ace in the hole. What are you going to do to stop them? But it leaves them with this chase of what is questionable mission objective, to what end, and who's behind it, and who else is involved, which leads us to a game that is really again, cyberpunk is a piece of sci-fi, so I'm going to stick with cyberpunk, but it's a thriller in the way that you are chasing down, and it's a story of intrigue that often has things like betrayal. It's dealing with a lot of political people. It may not always, but they're going to be big powers, right? But they're going to be big powers that you can compete with, unlike a lot of other cyberpunk games where you feel what am I going to do against Arataka or, Lone Star, trying to think across Arasaka, not Arataka, different games and companies. But and Militech. So in this, you have the power, and you can make change, and you can get people like prime ministers or presidents to change their mind or, quit. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a big difference.
But a lot of it becomes squad oriented. You're going into buildings, you're going after a target, you're trying to protect a target, whether it's a security thing, like in the main, the quick start adventure, you'll see there's a person giving a public speech that has a lot of, it's all over the news because it's testy. The topic material is divisive. And by doing so as part of public security, you're watching because you think that someone's going to try to infiltrate that person's mind, take over their body, and use this moment to, do or say things that would trigger all of society. So you're really there, not as the police who are watching the scene and the people and the riots and stuff, but you're there because you're like, I think there's a hacker here, and I'm trying to narrow down where they could be, how they could go about it, because they got to get to this person unless they already have. And these are elements we'll talk more about later. That it's the places it goes with different character types. One of the coolest things we have is the hacker version in this game is so uniquely fun compared to a lot of games because we're hacking people.
Nice.
Beyond just the net. The net's boring at this point, but we can hack people.
Been there, done that.
That's awesome. So then, we talked about the hacking, but what else can characters do in this game? What sort of fun stuff can you get up to?
So the different playbooks. When you think cyberpunk, people always think of their street samurai. In this case, we have a souped up soldier, which is our ranger. Every one of these characters is definitely you could see the heart and soul of a major squad member from the series in them. So that's Bato. Bato is probably the most famous character outside the major. They're the ones with the, what did they call the eyes? But the cyber eyes. So, and it's the all-seeing eye, I think is what they call it. And it's because they never close. But it gives them this freaky looking target symbol in each eye kind of looking thing. This like scope. But since they never close, you have our sniper, which is the game designer, fighting hard, trying to make it so that one of those people, everyone wants to play the sniper. It's just this kind of a squad game. People are like, give me the sniper. It's always like that second or third pick. I'm like trying to break some of it. We have a heavy weapons expert that I like to call the bomb. But John keeps pushing me back on that because John doesn't want all the games to, derail into, well, I am the bomb. Yeah, right. We have a special investigator that encapsulates two different characters that are quite different, but for a character sort of playbook or class, they're very similar. So we call it the special investigator. The special investigator can be as much as like the detective kind of cop, but also maybe like the knife fighting or LA criminal, because there's still a lot of the smooth talking, but then yet very human person of the squad. And then an interesting device that we've included in this is, again, kind of going back to what I said earlier. We don't want the hacker outside of the cool hacker, the wizard class hacker, the awesome one who hacks into people, to just be sitting back providing information in like the truck or the facility or the warehouse. So you actually have currently they can be played by player or GM, but it's kind of like they're like a group character. And the info warfare specialist is the core one. And recently we've been toying around with a technology specialist. And the idea is to have a character that people can call upon for information that still kind of loops the game master through them to peter out information. Also, because often in the game, in the story of the game, when we're delivering information, it is the boss calling. It is your information specialist, either channeling you in or telling you what we found, and this moving the plot along. So in a lot of gameplay, what's really neat is the game master in a lot of ways ends up playing 2 or 3 characters and talking to the players through a character in the game. That makes really good sense of how it flows. So it's a neat way to play, and as well just because of how it fits. So these characters are not for players to play as their own personal character because they're the ones in the back, right? But they're the ones that you can ask favors of. And you can build a relationship with over time. And if a player takes it or a GM takes it, we can add a personality because they're one of the team. They're just not a playable one that anyone would really like to have as a character. So for the experience.
That's cool.
So as you can imagine, it's kind of direct, right? Your soldier who has some kind of cybernetic body is going to like run through walls, break through tanks, bust people up. Your wizard class hacker is going to be able to do things like one of the things that we kind of lined them up was the thermal optics, which is like camouflage that can make you practically invisible. We've kind of lined that technology up with that class because it was so key to the major's character. Which also helps them get to the places they need to get to, gives them a little help when it comes into like military facilities and stuff. And then special investigator becomes more of your face. The weapons expert has some really cool stuff because they are meant to just drop in place and have the heavy guns, but they also counterbalance a little bit of like forensics data. So they have more weight than just being a big gun. Like they can help analyze the scene because they have more technology that helps them break down things that are combustible or, what's in the vents and what's in the air.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes the big guns are like, I'm great when it's combat, and then I'll just sit over here and like drink my coffee while everybody else does everything in non-combat scenes.
Polish my weapons.
Right? Yeah, I'll just be in the back, like kind of grunting and nodding vaguely.
It's a neat problem that a lot of this type of, when you have a group of specialists can really run into, especially in a modern world.
Right.
In a D&D-esque world, they're stuck because of technology, the lack of technology, right? Like we don't have cars, we don't have convenience. So the convenience is we're all together because otherwise we'd be too far away to ever help or be around to hear anything. But in the future, like you find things where you're like, well, call me when you need me. Like, or why would I go there? Or why would I be there if I don't have to physically be there? That's just endangerment. Why would I spend money or resources to do things I don't have to do? So you run into these issues a lot with, and particularly cyberpunk games. But it's neat in this style, like I said, particularly because the net. and also because you are so much better than everyone else and you're in such a unique position that it really has all these ways that kind of force the characters to be there, to do the things, to be together and build that camaraderie. So
Hold on, I was looking at the book and now I lost my spot in that one. I
it's
swear
good.
I was paying attention.
It's a really nice quick start. Yeah.
I want to talk about what's unique about Ghost in the Shell, particularly as a cyberpunk game. I would also like to talk a little bit about the decision to use Forge in the Dark, which is
sure.
Like, it's a very cool system, but it's certainly not the first one that crosses my mind when I think of cyberpunk. You know, as you mentioned before, those tend to be kind of crunchy, gritty sort of systems in a way that Forge in the Dark isn't.
Yeah. So, because that was the one you ended with, it led me more down. I had more thoughts on that immediately now that you said it. Yeah, so Forge in the Dark is very interesting because one of the elements that brought me in was obviously I'd been working on Cheo for a long period of time. And now it's the first intellectual property that went to Forge in the Dark. So some of it's convenient that I was really well suited to do Ghost in the Shell, particularly because the Mana Project, when they approached me, they very much had that in mind. They were open to other things. I like to bring up that their Cowboy Bebop game. I can see as a game designer, like when I read it, I was like, oh, this was Forged in the Dark, and then the designer had made choices that made it look less so, but it was just, its heart and core are there. And there's some games like the Wild Sea where you look at it, and I remember when it launched and it was like, hey, I'm Forged in the Dark, and it is, but like now the final product is definitely further from that, like almost in a way that like you can see that the core in there, but a lot of people are like, oh, it is, now that you point this and this out.
Actually, I'm thinking that now too. I'm like, oh, yes. Yeah.
So it is interesting how different systems really kind of not invade, but they inspire so much. And also they become frameworks that we start with. And that might be out of familiarity or just out of, I guess familiarity, because there are other reasons. It's like publishers and things, you might make different choices, but why designers go where they go.
Yeah.
So partially there, I mean, like the quick answer is that there was a lot of arrows saying, do this, like this. Hey, Pete, we would like you to make it. So we kind of had this in mind, and you're perfect for it to do it that way. And in some ways, I had really been dealing with the opposing idea of Blades in the Dark is the core of Forge in the Dark game, which is the heist game. But, you flip that on its head and you get, something like vigilantes or police or crime investigation. And that's what you went. So it was very neat for me to already kind of know what that looks like even before this was proposed to me, and then go, okay, but how would it need to be different? And what parts of Ghost in the Shell, elements, core tenets of the series, how do I make it feel that and not Chew or not feel vigilante or just buddy cop, But by then, especially like it's funny, by now, it was kind of a very obvious twist that wasn't that hard because it was just an inverse in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You do have to watch, and this is one thing that it's a little bit of a critique on both those games, is they can be a slow burn. And that's because the opposite of a heist is an investigation. An investigation can be, trotting, right? Like it can be like we're talking to people, we're asking questions, we don't know exactly where to go. Because stealing a thing is like, oh, how do we get in there? How do we get to the thing? Then we take it, But finding out who did it is a lot more questions. We don't have the known enemy. And then even when we do, we don't know if they're the right one. Especially
we're
in a
all
game
learning
of
with the Louvre heist right now. You can get in and get out real quick.
Oh, yeah.
But knowing anything about what happened, it turns out a lot harder.
Yeah, so it was an interesting challenge in some aspects, but at the same point, like the big one was really making it a little more action oriented. How do I give it an edge that would satisfy people? And I like to think that when we talk about that, I infused some Savage Worlds is a lot of what the inspiration was something that was also fast. Savage Worlds like to say it's like fast, fun, and furious or something. But, it still needed to be at its heart a kind of a narrative first story game, right? Like initiative in this game is really at like the whim of the narrative. Like we're not figuring out initiative. And if we need to, there is one score that you can kind of like that everyone has on their sheet they can go down by. But at its core, it was like, what is the story demand? And the GM is the director of that story. And the story, just like for most people, this is a TV show. This is a movie, or it's a book. And in those cases, there is a director or author. And in this way, the GM is really that narrative guide. And in some ways, you'll see that this veers from that a bit, that Forge in the Dark and In the Spirit of Powered by the Apocalypse is so much of a GM follows the player. The player leads the story. And while they do here because of the investigation base and because they get to pick and choose, and there's no wrong answer of where they take the story, the GM has a few more tools and controls of kind of when they interject and what they interject. And how they can kind of guide it. And even the narration of combat, because sometimes there are things villains that need to return later or something, right?
Yeah.
So
I think it's interesting because it was the moment I kind of sat down and thought about using Forged in the Dark for a cyberpunk game. I was like, I can see where the story beats and things like that would make sense. Having clocks, having, some of that, flashback scenes and all of that kind of stuff, where it makes sense. But it's, sort of my immediate thought is this is how we make cyberpunk games. And these are Forged in the Dark games. And it's narratively, it does have all of the tools to tell that kind of story. It's just not the system that my brain picked, because it's not one that really we use for those kinds of games. I appreciate you saying that
too, because you also point out some good elements that I take for granted, living in this space for so long, is that things like flashbacks, or just even the narrative focus, that we are looking from the top down a lot more.
Yeah.
And you want players to get out of their character's head of the minutia of their stats to some. There's more of this than most, right? Because it's like I said, I added a lot of things like that because the player type for most of these games wants that to some degree. But there's still all of the elements that come with more of the story game base of Forge in the Dark or Powered by the Apocalypse that was really important, because what makes Ghost in the Shell unique in the cyberpunk genre are these high-minded ideas, are these focuses on identity, the philosophy of man versus machine, of thoughts of who are the masses? What do they mean? Power structures and hierarchy, political players. So this could easily devolve to some street level game of cool, in Cyberpunk, I have so many Shadowrun games because it was my first game, where they just completely devolved in first session because people made, Street Samurais that were awesome, or they had some power build and they just go break in and steal stuff. But it wasn't any of that. And it never could be, because for this to truly be Ghost in the Shell, it had to have more of an identity itself. So a lot of story games do a great job of focusing on elements that to tell your theme. And I almost couldn't look at this in any other way of it being a generic system that cared nothing about the setting, we have way too many of those. This needed to be Ghost in the Shell, and whether it's the internet or how it looks at prosthetics and the identity you'll see on the character sheet itself, that question is in every part of the character sheet as well. So the character creation design, but when you get to the table, it had to be in your face. And I think that a lot of times the more traditional games, because they have that older style of a point buy, here's everything you can do. I don't know if it ties them together as well. And I would argue that usually what happens is in games that don't tie you together that well, they make a game of all the outliers that have no reason to be together.
Exactly.
No,
something
sold them out of
Forge
setting
in the Dark
and
just has such an emphasis on the team as a unit.
The playbooks force you to be what I need you to be, right? And they usually incentivize players not to pick the same one, even though you can. They usually because people want to be original and different, enough of your character is going to be similar if you pick the same playbook. So
like I said, I love that we can kind of start asking those kinds of questions of well, how do it's always my favorite question when we look at new games and when I read new games and things is what are we trying to get people to do in this game, and how do the mechanics of the game that we're using really reinforce people making those kinds of decisions that lead to the story that you want. And so much of cyberpunk games that I see are very individualistic and very we're sort of a team in spite of all of the mechanics for making individual people. Whereas something like Forged in the Dark, the emphasis really is on this unit and then the people within that unit.
Yeah, because of the playbooks and then the perks. One of the things that Forge in the Dark, I'm trying to think of other game systems that maybe do this as well, that it's flavored different. One of the nice things, because it's got so many levers, that every role is working off of a different situation and effect. Most people are used to that being like a position and effect, but we called it what situation you're in, right? Instead of what position of danger or risk you're in.
Yeah.
And how effective you're going to be in a situation. So it's neat because when these are game terms that we use commonly, when you have playbooks, you can also design character types who, for example, live on the edge. And when you play that character to like be always in a higher threat range of being more bold, you can do things like have players incentivized to be that, reckless character.
Yeah.
Because look, cool, the mechanics are supporting this action. I actually get more dice when I'm more reckless. Yeah, if I fail, it sucks more, but like that's the point of my character or where I should, excel. So that's been one of the things that I found in both these games that's neat is we have some more like levers, if you will.
Yeah. Well, this is the part that we talk about the history of the game.
Okay.
And I mean, Ghost in the Shell has a very robust history in and of itself.
I was a little overwhelmed because I'm always like, what, what can I like look into? And I'm like thinking, like maybe I can like watch a couple episodes of something or whatever. And I was like, oh, I don't even know.
Like there's the movie, right?
Right. Yeah.
My exposure is the one movie that started it all.
Okay,
and
good.
Then,
it wasn't the ScarJo movie, yeah.
No. Yeah, it was like the original movie. I watched it back when it was original, and I have not watched a single thing since, but it has always fascinated me. And like hearing that there's so much out there for it.
There's a lot. I was really overwhelmed. It was like I said, 27 video games, 37 made for TV movies, 12 seasons of anime. I'm like, this is too much.
There's a new show coming out next year.
Oh, boy.
That's wild.
Yeah. So the most recent was Arise, and that came out around 2015-ish. Don't quote me, maybe 2014 to 2016 or something. But it gets really weird without going into too much weeds. But like, if you go look up Arise, like if you have a Crunchyroll subscription or something, you're going to find that like there's 3 seasons, and season 1 is 4 episodes that are an hour long. Season 2 are the same 4 episodes broken up in 2 parts, but only subtitled for 8 episodes. Okay. So they only added 2 more episodes, which are kind of like half episodes because they're a half hour long. So it's weird.
Sure.
They're a little more edited. And then the 3rd season is an hour and a half movie, which covers some elements that have kind of been covered in that one season that was repeated, but in a more elegant hour and a half package that is its own standalone. So like,
that's interesting.
So with you saying this, I'd be like, go watch that movie. Like just watch that one movie. Like that would be, because you get the most out of it, like bang for your buck.
This is why I get so overwhelmed about like getting into this stuff, because it's like people are like, oh yeah, you only need to actually watch episode 8, 15, 16. They're like, you can skip all these other ones. Like people have like their watch order, and I'm just like, this is too much. It's too much.
Which is funny. Yeah, I've read a lot of Reddits too that are like, here's the watch order, and this is the watch order we propose. So Arise, while alternate, is basically the first time they've done something that's like a prequel to like the original Ghost in the Shell. And part of it also is they were like, hey, it's kind of hard to, like, that was made in the 90s. That was the original. That kind of led to so much more, 20 years later, here's a Rise. It's going to talk about that period, but like there has to be some liberties in there. I should say the classic of Masamune Shirow. But so Arise tries to give us like a refresh take on the prequel of it. And the prequel of it is, the major, Motoko Kusanagi, is like leaving the military and is getting this, is starting to be involved in a way with public security that is leading to this idea of if only there was a unit that was above the law, if only there was a special unit that like really actually could try to make change for good, that actually cared about the people as a whole and not any personal interest or all the interests they have to take care of to be able to do their job, like a politician or a corporation or any pioneer in business, or, they're just like, this system isn't working for the everyday person. Everyone knows it, but nobody can do anything. And from their military background and their expertise, they go, who could is if there was a team. if there was the A team, basically. So Arise is a lot about kind of the building, formation, recruiting, putting in place this thing. And that's really all I tried to cover was like the formation. We call this, so public security is like their version of the police, but it's a government agency. It's like, the police are public security. Like that's just their general term. And in the military, everyone came from different sections. That was kind of like their special operations. Like so we have like the SEALs and stuff, but it was like I was in 501. In Section 501. These were the different breaks in the military, just numbers. So in this case, it kind of becomes like a mix where the most popular section of public security becomes Section 9, which is like the beginning of the forefront of this individual unit kind of above the law in the name of public security, only answering to the chief, which is Aaron Maka, and they often called Apehead, and because he had this hair that kind of went to the side like a clown, so they said he looked like a monkey. And the prime minister of Japan, which Masamune would say they liked the English political structure. So they just, when they made the manga, the series, they were the inspirations. They were like, I like that bureaucracy better. So let's give them like a parliament, and they have prime ministers and vice prime ministers. Like that's just so like that's not how Japan works. They just the creator was like, I thought that was more interesting. Yeah. And if you ever go back and read the manga, one of the gems and the things that Masamune is often cheered for is a lot of this writing in the lines around the panels of stuff like that.
Sure.
I know there is no English parliamentary, but you know how cool it is? Yeah. So I said, this Japan has a prime minister. Yeah.
I decided it's the future. We can change how we do things.
Yep.
You can. Absolutely.
I mean, to be
it's
fair,
an alternate reality. So
as somebody who's spent a lot of time studying European politics, I like how the UK Parliament works too.
When I'm very curious is most people seem to agree that the standalone complex, which goes into the 2030s and sees this really grow and advance, and the major comes in and out of public security because, as you could imagine, if the natural story flow would be that eventually this doesn't work out as hoped because it oversteps or understeps or whatever. Eventually, something's going to do something because that what will happen with the future? It will change, right? Like that's just the future. But most people seem to agree that like standalone complexes where people's heart and soul went to with this, and that's kind of what they built in the 2000s and then early 2010s, which is like the long-standing Ghost in the Shell series that happened after the movie, right? So,
yeah. So, with all of that history in mind, how long have you been developing this game for?
Pretty much 2 years. Not an insane amount of time. It was proposed to me like at Origins, I think in 2023. So the quick start you're going to look at today, listener, is I actually turned this in last summer. So as things with licensing go start and stop, it was delivered like a year ago, and then it gets pretty quiet, and we've been working on all the kinds of like campaign things, oriented growth, advancement, all of these things, right? And also just playtesting. Like there's only so much playtesting you get in when you're giving a new game or system, depending on licenses. So sometimes there's things you put in there that you're like, this is gold, but I haven't done it 35 times to know if it's actually gold, you know? So
yeah, you're like, I feel it in my heart, but I need to see if other people, like if this translates to other people's brains rather than just my own.
Yeah, and there's elements of that too. So there's always things that are elements of work in progress.
Yeah. I'm curious, like how I mean, so you said you got approached by, was it by Mana Project Studios? Like they were like, we want to develop a game for this, and we need somebody to make it.
It's cute, actually, because I basically got some instant messages that were like pictures.
Yeah,
and they were like, and I think it was like, do you know what this is? And then that led to like, hey, can we meet? Can we talk? And they're Italian, like you mentioned. So, Zoom calls and stuff. And then, yep.
Yeah, I mean, they've made a lot of really cool games. Like, I'm excited that like you're getting to work with it, just because like I've seen a lot of the stuff that Mana Project Studios has put out over the last couple of years. Like, their game Not the End, I'm like obsessed with. Yeah. I want to play it so bad, and I haven't, but like I've read it a bunch of times, and like, they put out a lot of really cool games over the last couple of years. So I'm excited to to see this one in full because like I
It's
love what
funny
they're
as a
doing.
throwback to you, in the Ennies is like I really met Michele, Mike Paroli, who is like the head of Mana Project. I probably would have met them if it wasn't for the Ennies, because we had some mutual friends when they came here from Italy. But
Sure.
they came for Gen Con, and now you can meet people like Mike and people like Need Games and things. They're coming to a lot more shows, but they. That is a newer phenomenon. I like the Two Little Mice people were at what was the last Gen Con.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot more of the people coming across the pond, and not just from the UK, but from like countries like Italy. So
there've been a lot of really good
interesting,
Italian games coming out the last few years. Like it's things are really. I mean, at least finally making it here. I don't want to say that they're like really finally doing things in Italy because I'm sure they've been doing them for a while, but like the translations are certainly finally getting over here. And like, there's been a lot of really cool international things. Like I think we've gotten some stuff from Poland over the last couple of years that has been really cool too. I mean, obviously a lot of Swedish stuff too has been, kind of for a long time, but
what do you mean? That's American these days.
Yes,
Swedish.
That's pretty much
it's funny we take that for granted
because
Free League has been around for so long.
But like I'm seeing a lot of cool stuff coming out internationally, especially.
The big thing is just that we're still the market. Like the U.S. market is still where it's at. Like I was joking with someone who works in Australia, and they were like, distributor, and whether it's true or not, they're like, I think there might be 2,000 people who play RPGs in Australia. Is what they told me, and I pushed back a little bit, and they were like, no, I seriously think there might be 2,000 or 3,000 like total. And they've been in the business forever. So there's elements of this.
A couple people holding up the market. They're like, I will buy all
like
400
2 game
games
stores in the country.
Well, it's funny because I have a couple friends that have game stores and in Australia and stuff. And then you're like, come on, seriously, it's more than that. But just the point is that someone who's there could straight face tell you that they think that there's not that many people. But there's the elements of the grass is greener too.
For sure.
Like the UK has, like I used to bug people in the UK, like Rowan Rick and Deckard, and be like, "Where do you get all these backers from?" Because there's clearly there's a lot of UK backers, So, but like you said, Amelia, that I remember when the Italians were first popping on the scene, saw a lot of Kickstarters, and that did lead me to seek out some of them, and I was asking them questions as a publisher of things like, "What's going on with the graphic design?" Because like, how much you guys paying? Like what's going, because there was just so much incredible content coming out of Italian designers and going to crowdfunding. And it was kind of a duh answer because it was like, well, Pete, our country is a lot smaller than yours. And what do you know Italy for? Art.
Yeah.
We have major art schools all over the place.
Like my first response was like pasta.
Right. That was probably my first joke too.
Yeah, like who, I do have my family is very Italian. Like my grandmother was from Italy. Like I'm allowed. It's fine.
But it was just
there's a reason we have Italian food on Christmas at my house. Like,
there's a lot of art students and a lot of artists that are just like looking for work and they're around and also it's neat to talk to there's a guy, Andrea, I can't say his last name really well, but he works at a store called Stratagemma and it's a pretty great RPG store, especially for the indies. And he always calls role-playing games the opera. And I just love that. So I also get the sense from more people, I mean, they might not fully agree, that there's more art appreciation with role-playing games. And there's also just more, it didn't become something necessarily that's like, that ever had as much of a taboo. Like
the Satanic Panic wasn't like a huge thing that happened over there. They're like, oh, well, we're Italian, like we love dramatic storytelling, and like that feels like very culturally relevant. Whereas over here, they're still like, like.
Yeah, you might be like, well, I don't really improv, but you don't look at it differently, like it's a lesser form of acting or something. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that is really interesting. I don't know that I've like spent a lot of time thinking like culturally about like, like that they don't have the Satanic Panic and the sort of like fundamentalist Christian, background that you're fighting against too, that we have here in the same way.
I don't know. I mean, I know there's bullies everywhere, but like we are the country that was like known for our stereotypes of like, the high school bullies and the nerd, like all of our 80s movies were the culture movies for like the world for different periods, so I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's exciting to see some of that, like, kind of trickling in here, and like I'm excited that you get to work with that, because like they've been putting out so much cool stuff lately, so like I hope that it's been a really good experience for you, because like I love what they're doing. I love what they're making.
Yeah. They're really good people too.
Yes. Well, tell them to call me if they have new games coming out and they want to talk to somebody.
I know.
Like,
okay.
Yeah, seriously.
Talk to them about their stuff.
Well, you'll definitely be on the radar after this.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I was like, hey, can I do some podcasts? Just because like I have to ask. Like, is that okay?
Yeah.
Like, and of course they were like, sure. They're like, just coordinate. Like please, like you want to do some work, I was like, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, can I walk around and talk about this game? I would love to just talk.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the business side of things, there is a crowdfunding campaign coming up for that. I don't know can you tell us some details? Like when is it going to start about, and like what can we expect from that?
So it's November 4th. So it's coming up rapidly.
Yeah, the day after this.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I was like,
day after this
it's probably already happened.
Yeah. Today would be Monday, the 3rd, that is releasing, unless you're listening ahead of time on the Patreon, but
yeah. So far we've announced that there's the core book. There's an amazing looking deluxe book that's got like kind of this red and black trim with like the characteristic major in the middle, kind of in the fetal position that we often see them, almost like in a water tank.
Oh yeah.
But it's a neat adaptation to the core book, which has that same image, but like not them furled up in the fetal position, more open in this tank, which is kind of something we've seen with Ghost in the Shell, is that like it's like being in water is a lot like birth, is like we see in this it's a lot of sci-fi stuff we see this in, but it's like a way for, it's almost like a meditation tank, kind of thing. Is it like when your body is relaxed and at ease and it has no weight or pressures, it might be easier for you to like be more in your own head and be away from all of the physical issues, which is an interesting concept within its own when you talk about this game property itself. But so there's a lot of visuals where we'll see that with the major in the series, as well as like, in the covers of these books, that it's like maybe the most ultimate form of like hacking. So we often see like these tanks with like, convenient cord placement because they're mostly naked in their artificial prosthetic bodies, floating around with some kind of tube or, thing over their face. And also we see this when, regenerative properties, right? Like when you're repairing the more organic materials. Because there was something I read somewhere, gosh, I wish I could remember, but it was incredible. It was like, while this is a fully prosthetic body that most of these characters, not most, but, the major Bato, some of these serious characters are, they were talking about like how there was still a level of organics on them, even if it's like coating, that's like ridiculous, like that there was still like the tongue could taste 34 different flavors or something. So like there was still a level of organics that you almost feel like, oh, well, that whole thing's fake. It's all prosthetics. It's like, yeah, but they want to have the sensory feelings that are human. So that tongue is still grown and it's still in there and works just like it's just plugging into things versus like attached to your body and your brain and the nervous system. It's the, mechanical or inorganic nervous system, so.
Right. Yeah. You still have to have that sensory input.
Yeah. In real life, just recently, they have connected to people's brains and had them feel what another person is touching.
Nope.
Right.
I was fascinated years ago when they figured out that they can connect your taste buds to your vision. That like they can. That was wild to me.
But like they can do that with sensory inputs from like inorganic, appendages and stuff like that. So now you can have a prosthetic that eventually, once they perfect the technology, right, that can hook into your brain directly. And then now you can feel the stuff that you're grasping instead of just see the stuff that you're grasping.
Yeah. I mean, they could definitely like not that far away from a lot of those things. Like it's
so 2029. I mean, we could.
Yeah.
Call to action.
Yeah, like that.
Well, I'm going to keep this brief because my voice is utterly destroyed from cheering way too loud with a disappointing finish to the game for those Packer fans out there. But Pete has been an amazing person to get to know over the last few years, and being able to see him in person at GameholeCon and connect and get this game in the books on the show for his first full series, a couple of wonderful spotlights under his belt beforehand. But it was a true joy. It was fantastic to talk with him and to just kind of sit back and relax in the discussion about this game and the industry and the design process and all that sort of good stuff. This whole series is packed full of fantastic moments like that. So definitely stay tuned for future episodes because not only do we get into some fantastic character creation, we also get into some fantastic discussion every step of the way. I cannot wait for you all to hear that. But before we let you go for the day, we do have some calls to action. First up, last month's game, Cosmic Corsairs, is in its last couple days on their Kickstarter campaign. It looks like one new stretch goal has been added, so check it out if you haven't yet. Also, if you like what you have been hearing on today's episode, the crowdfunding campaign for Ghost in the Shell should be kicking off tomorrow, the day after this episode releases. Check the show notes for a link to that Kickstarter as well, and save it as a reminder to check it out when it launches. The game looks fantastic, and I cannot wait for you to hear how the characters came out for this one. In other news, our Undying Bonds live stream is currently in flux in terms of when we will be able to do the next one. We are working with the network to figure out some scheduling conflicts that postponed the last couple of planned dates. But as soon as we have something solid to share, maybe later this week even, we will post it on Blue Sky or on our Discord at discord.charactercreationcast.com. Join us on either of those communities to get the latest updates. Aside from that, we would love it if you checked out the C3 Patreon at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. We are slightly behind on our first funding goal to get to that original $160 a month. And we would love to order some enamel pins and send them out to our campaign level patrons. We're waiting to get to that level before we do so. If we can lock that in and get to $200 a month, not only will that unlock yearly subscriptions for our supporters at a discount, it will also mean that we can afford to pay Fiona a little bit more every month to update the backlog of games on our site, as she is our new webmaster. We can get there by the end of this year with just 4 or 5 more campaign level backers. At the $10 level, that campaign level, you get a load of stickers, our custom 3d6 set of C3 dice from Chessex, all of our bonus episodes, and a lot more. The other tiers have some great perks as well, so check it out if you have a chance. In addition to all of that, we do like to thank our current patrons every episode. Your support truly helps out a great deal, so let's go ahead and do that right now. Lieutenant DJG, aka Tigranosaurus, and Eric Bonds, thanks for making this all possible. Thank you to Daryl Holiday II, Shadim Cabal, and the Shyest Barbarian. We couldn't do this without you. Benjamin Sweeney, Rob Fletcher, and Kevin Brown, thanks for helping us make the show. Thank you to Tentacle Duck, John Adamus, and A3 Sketchpad. We couldn't do this without you as well. Carlos Salazar, Eric S., and Ian Potmeyer, you're the best. Thanks. Liam G., Brian Coleman, and Garden GM, thanks for making all this possible. Tanglefoot, Blue Kryptonite, and Danny, we are so very grateful to all of you. Nicole Trainer, Liam Murray, and Kenning, thank you all for your continued support. We're glad to have you here as well, Brian Kurtz, Mark E. Fair, and Drew Owen, thanks for supporting. Oz, Sean Metcalf, and Robert, thanks for supporting our dreams. Kevin Bates, Deadly Edley, and Allison Cole, we can't thank you enough, but we'll keep on trying anyway. And finally, Blue Scholar, thank you so much for your support. And thank you to all of our future patrons. If you want to join this phenomenal group of individuals, please head on over to patreon.com/charactercreationcast and help us out. And with more assistance, we'll be able to make those website upgrades and make exploring your favorite games that much easier. And if you want to join in the discussion with our hosts, some of our guests, and a bunch of fans, head on over to our Discord at discord.charactercreationcast.com. Finally, if you want to help us in another way that doesn't require any money, you can leave a rating and review for our show on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or Podcast Addict. Probably the easiest which is Podchaser, because you can get to it from anywhere. We will read every new 5-star review as we get them, and as we both have a chance to record together. We would love to see more and have it brighten our days. That's all we have for today's episode. Join us here next time when we finish learning about the history of this game and then start diving into Ghost in the Shell character creation with Pete. Until then, take care everyone, stay safe, drink some water, maybe have a lozenge if your voice is going away, and keep making those amazing people. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this character creation series. We'll be back in part 2, picking up right where we left off.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can also be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at CreationCast, or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used and today's guests can also be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support our show, find us on Patreon. Get access to bonus episodes, exclusive merch, and much more at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We'll see you next time.